The dust hung heavy in the beams of late sunlight streaking through the slats of the old livestock barn. It danced in slow motion above the ring floor, catching the last rays like golden ghosts. The Thursday auction had gone as usual. Fast talk, fast bids, and fast judgments. But when Lot 37 stepped into the ring, time seemed to hesitate. A skinny foal, ribs sharp beneath stretched skin, fur dull and sunburned, walked slowly toward the center. He was a light reddish bay, almost cinnamon in color, with a short, rough black mane and a pale white diamond set right between his wide, frightened eyes. People shifted in their seats, but no one leaned forward. The men in denim jackets and dusty cowboy hats exchanged smirks. A few women lowered their bidding cards without a word. This wasn't the kind of animal anyone came looking for. The foal's legs were long but too thin, like they couldn't hold him through winter. His sides rose and fell quickly, nervous. But even so, there was something in the way he looked around, not desperate, but aware. Like he was searching for someone. Lot 37, the auctioneer called flatly. No papers. No confirmed bloodline. Seized from a foreclosure out near Limestone Creek. His voice echoed against the old metal walls. Opening bid, $50. Silence. A man near the front snorted. That bag of bones? He won't make it to fall. A few others chuckled. The foal flinched but didn't retreat. He just stood there, his eyes wide and fixed on something in the distance. Or someone. Back row, left corner, stood Orville Dean, stiff and still in his brown corduroy jacket. His boots didn't move. Neither did his hands, pressed white against the railing. His breath caught. That face, that white diamond on the foal's forehead, he'd seen it before. Years ago. On a horse that once belonged to Theda Pearl, his only daughter. The same daughter he buried after a fire stole everything but a photo frame and a scorched wedding dress. That Colt. He couldn't be, no. But Orville couldn't look away. It wasn't just the shape of the mark. It was the look in the eyes. It was her look. The auctioneer was ready to give up. No bids? All right, moving on. His name's Hope. The voice came sharp, boyish, from the far side of the barn. Heads turned. It was Huck Rylan, a wiry foster kid from a group home down in Denton. Barely 12. Too small for his boots, too quiet for the world. But when he spoke, the colt lifted its head. And walked, not stumbled, but walked, straight toward the boy. Murmurs spread across the crowd. The boy took off his cap and whispered again, "Hope." The foal stopped beside him, rested its head against his chest. And Orville Dean felt a weight crack loose in his chest, like a storm rolling in after years of drought. Because that horse should be dead. Just like Theda. And somehow, this boy knew. The barn was still buzzing, but it wasn't with bids. Conversations hummed in low, confused tones. The foal, now clearly responding to the name Hope, stood calm beside the boy like they had arrived together. As if they belonged. The auctioneer blinked hard, unsure whether to proceed or just step off the platform. Orville Dean hadn't moved. He was still gripping the railing, but his mind was somewhere else, in the smoke of a fire, the echo of a woman's laughter, and a memory he'd fought like hell to bury. Theda Pearl had been 23 when she died. Strong-willed, too smart for a small town, too kind to survive it. She'd always loved horses, especially the wild ones. Her last foal was a chestnut mare with a white star. The mother of the colt now standing in the ring, Orville realized with a sick twist in his gut. That mare had disappeared in the fire. Or so he thought. Orville's throat closed. The resemblance wasn't just in the mark. It was in the eyes, the way the foal moved, as if it carried her spirit in its fragile body. But that wasn't possible. Was it? "Sir." A quiet voice pulled him back. A tall man in worn jeans and a blue polo, one of the auction hands, stood beside him. That kid. Do you know him? Orville shook his head slowly. Never seen him in my life. The worker frowned. Funny thing is, nobody brought the boy in. He wasn't listed with the ranch that surrendered the horses. His voice dropped. And that colt wasn't on the manifest either. He just showed up. That sentence hit Orville like a punch. Just showed up. Just like the fire. Just like the loss. Just like the guilt that refused to die. Huck Rylan stood tall, or tried to. People were watching him now, all those eyes, some amused, some suspicious. He didn't flinch. He gently scratched Hope's neck, whispering something that no one else could hear. The foal leaned into him like they shared a secret. A bond. Orville finally took a step forward. Just one. Boy, he said, voice rough as gravel, where'd you hear that name? Huck looked up slowly. She told me, he said simply. In a dream. A shiver rippled through the crowd. Someone chuckled awkwardly. Kids making it up, a man muttered. But Orville's hands were shaking. Theda Pearl used to say that name in the field every morning, Hope. She'd named the mare after a miscarriage no one talked about. That name was private, sacred, and this boy had no way of knowing it. Unless she had told him. Unless what Orville feared most, that the dead don't stay silent, was true. His eyes met the colt's once more. And this time, it was the colt who looked at him like he was the ghost. That night, the barn emptied slower than usual. People left in clusters, talking low, stealing glances back at the boy and the foal. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others whispered about ghosts and second chances. No one quite knew what to make of it. The auctioneer refused to record a sale for Lot 37, claiming he needed to clarify ownership. But the truth was simpler. He was scared. That horse hadn't just responded to a name, it had recognized it. And worse, the boy had known it without ever being told. Orville Dean sat alone in his truck long after the crowd was gone. The engine wasn't running. The keys were in his lap. He stared out the windshield at the empty arena gate, his knuckles white around the wheel. He hadn't spoken Theda's name out loud in over 10 years. He hadn't walked to the back pasture since the fire, hadn't visited her grave since the funeral. And yet tonight, her memory had come back, not quietly, but loud. In a boy he'd never met. In a horse that shouldn't exist. Something about it all scratched at the edges of his mind like a warning. He remembered that day. The fire. How fast it had started. How Theda had gone back inside for the mare. How he'd begged her to leave it. And how the barn had collapsed before he could stop her. They never found her body fully. Just parts of her clothes and ashes. The mare's remains weren't there either, assumed lost in the same blaze. But now, looking back, a question he never dared ask came whispering. What if the mare had survived? What if someone took her? What if she had foaled? That would mean Hope wasn't just a horse with a name. He was a bloodline. A secret Theda had carried, and died trying to protect. At the diner across town, Huck Rylan sat quietly at a booth, sipping sweet tea like it was the first warm thing he'd had in weeks. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with silver rings and a tired kindness, asked if he had anyone to call. Huck just shook his head. No one left, he said. Not that knows me. Then he looked out the window, toward where Hope was waiting in the trailer behind the sheriff's office. Except maybe him. That night, Orville couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the boy's voice. She told me in a dream. Who was this boy? Why did he look like someone Orville almost recognized? And how in God's name did he speak a name Orville thought he'd buried with his daughter? Then something even darker crossed his mind. What if the dream wasn't just a memory? What if it was a message? And what if it wasn't meant for Huck, but for him? Morning came gray and cold, with a light mist hanging over the Wexler fields like breath that wouldn't fade. Orville Dean hadn't slept. Not really. He dozed in fits, haunted by flashes of smoke, hooves pounding against the barn floor, and the last scream he never got to answer. He sat at his kitchen table in silence, staring at the half-empty mug of black coffee he hadn't touched. Across the counter, an old photograph of Theda Pearl in her riding vest leaned against a cracked sugar jar. She was smiling, squinting into the sun, with the same fierce look Hope had in his eyes. It hit Orville again like it always did. She should still be here. He drove into town before sunrise, parking outside the sheriff's office where Hope had been temporarily housed in a trailer stable. The streets were empty. Just the wind pushing leaves down the sidewalk and the hum of an early truck on the highway. Huck Rylan was already outside, sitting cross-legged beside the trailer gate, his hand resting on Hope's nose through the bars. The boy didn't look tired. He looked calm, like he'd known this horse forever. When Orville stepped out of the truck, Huck didn't move, didn't speak. He just looked at him, straight through him. "You still say you saw her?" Orville asked finally, voice dry. Huck nodded. "Not like a dream. More like, I woke up and felt her. Like someone was holding my hand. She said, 'Find him.' I didn't know who she meant until I saw him." He gestured toward Hope. "Then I knew." Orville's chest tightened. That was the same thing Theda used to say when she spoke about the foals. You don't choose them, they choose you. It was nonsense back then. A young woman's dream talk. But now, it sounded less like fantasy and more like a whisper through time. Back at the trailer, Hope whinnied softly and pawed the wooden floor, as if restless. Orville walked closer. For the first time, the Colt didn't just watch him. He stepped forward, pressed his head gently into Orville's chest. The old man stiffened. His eyes burned. "He knows you," Huck said. "He's not afraid of you. Like he's been waiting." Orville swallowed hard. "You don't know what that means, son." Huck tilted his head. "Maybe I do. Maybe that's why I came." Inside the sheriff's office, Deputy Keller watched from the blinds. He was new in town, but he knew when something didn't feel right. A kid with no record. A horse with no papers. An old man with fire in his past. It didn't add up. And yet, it felt like something was just starting. Something big. He picked up the phone and dialed. "Sheriff, you might want to come down here. There's something you need to see." Sheriff Boon arrived just after 9 a.m., boots crunching on gravel, the morning sun catching the silver in his mustache. He was a man molded by the county. Calm, slow to speak, and not easy to rattle. But even he paused when he saw the scene. Orville Dean, standing quietly with his hand resting on a sickly foal's back, and a boy, too young, too sure, watching like he already knew how this would end. Boon glanced at Deputy Keller, who nodded toward the trailer. "Watch the way that Colt moves around the kid," Keller said under his breath. "It ain't normal." Boon approached Orville with the kind of caution reserved for explosives and grieving men. "Morning, Orville. Didn't expect to see you here." Orville didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on Hope, tracing the diamond-shaped star on the Colt's forehead like it was a scar from another lifetime. "That horse," he said finally, "shouldn't exist." Boon gave him a sideways glance. "You mean he looks like her mare?" Orville's voice cracked. "No. I mean, he is her mare. Same fire. Same eyes. Same damn fight." Inside the trailer, Huck gently brushed Hope's side with his hand. "I dreamed about the barn last night," he said, as Boon joined him. "I saw her. I think her name was Theda." Boon froze. That name hadn't been spoken in a decade around these parts, not since the fire. He turned slowly toward the boy. How do you know that name, son? Huck didn't blink. She told me. She said, he won't come looking, but he'll find us anyway. The silence that followed felt too heavy for the small space. Orville stepped inside the trailer. The air felt thick, like the past had come in with him. He looked at Huck, then at the horse. You're not from around here, are you? Huck shook his head. Group home in Denton. I've been moved around a lot. But this place, it's like I've already lived here. Orville studied him closely now. The sharp jaw, the eyes, the way his left foot turned slightly inward when he stood. Just like Theda's had. A chill ran up his spine. Boon cleared his throat, trying to ground them back to reason. Let's just say, hypothetically, this Colt is connected to your daughter. That still doesn't explain how this boy knows anything about her. Or why he showed up here, now, out of nowhere. Huck looked at them both, calm, unafraid. Because you buried the fire. But something survived. And it wasn't just the horse. Orville turned pale. His breath caught. Because in that moment, looking at the boy, he didn't just see a stranger. He saw a reflection. And something in him whispered a word he hadn't dared think in years. Blood. Orville didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the boy, the weight of 1,000 unsaid things pressing down on his chest. The resemblance was subtle, but now it screamed. The shape of Huck's jaw. The way he looked straight at you without blinking, like he saw through skin and bone into something deeper. The way his voice carried calm, even when he was saying things that shouldn't be possible. Orville's hands trembled as he stepped back from the trailer, needing air, needing space. But it followed him, that creeping truth. Boon stayed behind with Huck, asking gentle questions. Huck answered them with a quiet clarity that felt unnatural for a 12-year-old. Do you know your parents' names? Boon asked. Huck shook his head. I was dropped off at a fire station when I was a baby. No note. No file. Just a blanket and a bracelet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, frayed piece of leather. Boon unfolded it slowly. It was handmade, worn, and stitched with fading letters. T.P. Boon's heart skipped. Where'd you get this? Huck looked down. They said it was on my wrist when I was found. Outside, Orville lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, something he hadn't done in 10 years. The wind blew ash across the gravel, but he didn't move. His mind was spinning, faster than it had in decades. Could Theda have had a child? Could she have hidden it from him? And if so, who was the father? No, that wasn't the right question. The real question was, why would she hide it? Unless it was someone he never would have accepted. Someone from her past she knew he wouldn't forgive. Back in the trailer, Hope nuzzled Huck's shoulder gently, like trying to comfort him. Boon watched closely, noting the way the Colt responded only to the boy. That horse doesn't act like he's ever been mistreated, he said. But he acts like he remembers. Like he's come back to finish something. Huck nodded. I think he has. I think we all have. Boon raised an eyebrow. You believe in fate? Huck didn't answer right away. Then he looked Boon dead in the eye and said, No, but I believe in second chances. Orville re-entered slowly, face pale. He looked at Huck, then at Boon. You said he was dropped off 12 years ago? Boon nodded. Orville's voice was low, shaking. Theda died 13 years ago. Just after her mare went missing. Just after she stopped talking to me. His eyes moved to Huck. I thought the fire was the end. But maybe it was a beginning. One she couldn't explain. And then Huck asked, Do you want to know the rest? Because he did. And something in Orville told him, the boy already knew more than anyone should. Orville sat down on the wooden bench just outside the trailer, hands clasped tight, eyes locked on the gravel beneath his boots. He looked like a man on the edge of collapse, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of something returning, something he'd buried years ago. Boon stepped back, giving him space. Huck stood still, one hand resting on the trailer gate, the other gently stroking Hope's neck. The silence between them was heavy, almost sacred. Then Huck spoke again, voice quieter now, but clear. "You still want to know what she said?" Orville hesitated, like someone afraid of what the truth might cost. Then, slowly, he gave a nod. Huck closed his eyes. When he spoke, it wasn't with the voice of a child. It was steady, like he was reading from someplace deeper. "She said she forgives you. For the words you never took back. For the things you didn't say when she needed to hear them. For not listening when she tried to tell you the truth about the baby." The world went still. Orville's breath caught like a hand around his throat. "What truth?" he whispered, though part of him already knew. "She tried to tell you," Huck said. "But you thought she was just being young. Reckless. You thought she was lying to get your attention. But the baby was real. She was scared. She didn't want to lose you. She didn't want to disappoint the only family she had left." Orville bent forward, hands pressed to his face, shoulders shaking. Boon didn't move. Huck stayed quiet. Hope took a slow step forward and pressed his head gently into Orville's knee, like he was asking him to rise. To listen. To accept. Then came the memory, sudden, sharp, Theda crying on the porch during a storm, telling him she needed to say something important. He didn't listen. He'd shouted, said she was throwing her life away. She'd gone silent. And a few days later, the fire took everything. Or so he thought. Maybe the fire hadn't just destroyed. Maybe it had revealed something he wasn't ready to face. Boon finally spoke. "Do you believe him now?" Orville looked up at the boy like he was seeing him for the first time. "I don't think it matters what I believe," he said, voice cracked. "I think he knows the truth, whether I'm ready or not." Huck didn't smile. He didn't need to. He wasn't there to convince anyone. He was what was left. Then Huck said, "She told me there's more. Things buried. Things you need to see." Orville met his eyes. And for the first time he asked, "Where?" The old road hadn't been driven in years. Trees had leaned in over time, their branches scraping the top of Orville's rusted truck as he followed Huck's directions in silence. The air was heavy, thick with humidity and the scent of pine needles rotting underfoot. Orville's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and he hadn't spoken since they left town. He knew where Huck was leading him. There was only one place out here that still haunted him, the old farmstead. What was left of it? Hope was in the trailer behind them, unusually calm, as if he too knew this road. Boon had offered to follow, but Orville declined. "Some things you faced alone. Or with blood." The tires crunched over gravel and mud as the truck rounded the last bend. And then, it appeared, or what was left of it. The barn was gone, of course, nothing but a twisted skeleton of beams buried in weeds. The house, too, had collapsed in on itself long ago. But the field still stood wide and empty, wrapped in fog and memory. Huck stepped out before Orville did, walking straight toward the patch of trees just past the edge of the field. He didn't look back. Hope whinnied once from the trailer as if giving them permission. Orville followed, slowly, boots pressing into earth that had once been home. Every step felt heavier. The wind shifted, and with it came the faintest scent of smoke. Not real, not present, but remembered. He could hear Theda's voice somewhere in that wind, laughter from another life. At the tree line, Huck stopped and pointed. "There," he said. "Under that one." It was an oak, bent slightly to the east, its bark scarred from lightning or time. Orville looked at it like he was staring down a ghost. "She buried something there," Huck said. "Before the fire. She told me to bring you." Orville dropped to one knee, brushing away leaves and soft earth with his bare hands. The ground gave easily, as if it too had been waiting. He found it within minutes. A rusted tin box, small, with Theda's initials carved faintly into the lid. His breath caught as he opened it. Inside, a folded photo of her holding a newborn, a lock of chestnut horsehair, and a letter, yellowed with age. His fingers trembled as he unfolded it. The first words, "Daddy, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner." Behind him, Huck stood silent, watching. Hope had stepped down from the trailer, grazing near the fence like nothing was wrong. But Orville knew everything had changed, and the truth wasn't buried anymore. It had been waiting. The letter trembled in Orville's weathered hands as he unfolded it completely. The ink had faded in places, but her handwriting, strong, slanted, unmistakable, still carried her voice. His breath caught in his throat as he began to read. "Daddy, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of how you'd look at me after. Afraid you'd think I ruined everything. But I need you to know, I didn't regret any of it. Not the choice. Not him." Orville's heart thudded. Every word pulled him deeper into a guilt he'd tried for years to deny. The letter went on. His name was Eli. He wasn't from here. He was kind, Daddy. Gentle with the horses. He taught me things, not just about the animals, but about myself. You said he was trouble, and maybe he was, in your world. But in mine, he was the first person who really listened. Orville clenched his jaw. He remembered Eli, a drifter who'd worked on the ranch for a season. A good worker. A quiet one. But Orville had sent him away the moment he saw how Theda looked at him. "When I found out I was pregnant," the letter continued, "I knew I had to choose between losing you or losing myself. I wasn't strong enough to tell you. Not then. I thought the mare, Hope's mother, would be the symbol. That I could raise the foal and the baby together. That maybe you'd come around. But everything happened so fast. The fire. I don't even know how it started." Orville stopped. His breath hitched. "I wasn't supposed to be in the barn, but I went back for her. For Hope. I had hidden the baby already. He was safe." Orville turned slowly to look at Huck, who stood watching him with wide, steady eyes. 1,000 images ran through Orville's mind. Huck's voice, the bracelet, the timing, the dreams. He didn't need a blood test. He knew. The boy wasn't just a strange visitor. He was family. His grandson. The last piece of Theda he never got to hold. Hope whinnied softly behind them, pawing the ground like he, too, felt the weight of the moment. Huck didn't say anything. He just walked forward, stopping a few feet from Orville. "She loved you," he said, "even when you were angry. Even when she was scared." Orville tried to speak, but the words dissolved in his throat. He nodded slowly, tears running down a face that hadn't let them fall in years. Then Huck asked quietly, "What do we do now?" Orville looked down at the letter one more time. And for the first time in years, he whispered, "We go home." Weeks passed, and the land began to change with the season. Summer's heat gave way to cooler winds, and the fields around the old farm began to breathe again. Orville had made his decision. The land, once left to rot under grief and silence, was being brought back to life, fence by fence, board by board. The old barn would take time, but it would stand again. And this time, it wouldn't just be wood and nails. It would hold meaning. It would hold memory. And it would hold them. Huck stayed. There were no questions, no papers, no resistance. When the county heard Orville was taking him in, no one objected. Sheriff Boon signed what needed to be signed, quietly, respectfully. Everyone in town seemed to understand that something sacred had happened, something no law or blood test could explain better than the look on Orville's face when he stood next to the boy, or the way Huck carried himself now, not lost, not wandering, but rooted. Home. Hope, now healthy and gaining weight, ran in the morning light across the fields he was born to roam. His ribs no longer showed. His eyes were brighter, his coat shinier, and his spirit fuller. He followed Huck everywhere, like a shadow made of muscle and memory. Orville sometimes stood on the porch with coffee in hand, watching the two of them. And every time he saw them, he didn't just see what was, he saw what could have been. And that was enough. One Sunday, Huck found a small wooden box tucked behind the rebuilt tool shed. Inside it was a worn-out photograph. Orville, younger, with Theda on his shoulders, both laughing like the world had never hurt them. Huck brought it to him silently. Orville looked at the picture for a long time, then placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, beside the letter. No more drawers. No more hiding. Her story would live here now. In this house. With them. That night, they sat by the fire. Orville told Huck stories he'd never told anyone. About Theda as a girl, about her favorite horse, about the way she used to race the wind. Huck listened with a quiet smile, eyes shining. Then, just before bed, he said, "She'd be proud of you, you know." Orville nodded, eyes misting. "I hope so," he whispered. "I really do." And outside, under a sky full of stars, Hope lifted his head and neighed, not out of fear, or pain, or hunger, but simply because he was home. And so were they.